What will happen when a young, curious rhino wanders too far from his family in the wild plains of Kruger National Park? His small adventure soon turns into a fight for survival, and the rescue that follows will show the most unexpected act of kindness ever seen in the animal world. The story begins in Kruger National Park, one of the biggest and most well-known wildlife parks in Africa. Many animals live there, like elephants, lions, leopards, and giraffes, all moving freely under the wide, open sky. Among them was a family of rhinos, eating grass and enjoying the warm afternoon sun. Everything was peaceful and calm, until one young and curious rhino decided to walk a little farther away from his family than he should have. Young ones are always full of curiosity, and this little rhino was no different. Every morning he loved to run ahead of his herd, chasing butterflies and exploring every sound around him. The park stretched endlessly, where every animal had its own peaceful space. But the young rhino didn't understand those invisible lines. To him, there were no limits, only paths to discover, and his excitement grew with every step he took away from his family. As he moved farther, the soft green grass began to fade, and the land turned dry and uneven. Cracks spread across the ground, but he kept walking, unaware of what lay ahead. Then, without warning, the earth beneath him gave way. The young rhino slipped, rolling helplessly down a steep slope until he landed hard at the bottom of a deep pit. The walls rose high above him, too steep and smooth for his heavy body to climb. He tried again and again, using all his strength to push himself upward. Each time, his powerful legs kicked the dirt, but it only made the ground crumble beneath him. The more he struggled, the deeper he seemed to sink. Panic began to rise inside him as he realized he couldn't escape. The wide, open world he loved so much now felt like a trap. He let out a loud, deep cry that echoed across the plains, hoping someone would hear him. Far away, his herd stopped grazing and lifted their heads. They recognized that cry. It was one of their own in danger. Without a second thought, the older rhinos began to run, their heavy feet shaking the ground. When they reached the pit, they gathered around and called out softly. They tried to comfort him, but the walls were too steep. No matter what they did, he couldn't get out. Everyone knew there was nothing they could do, his voice weak from fear. The others grunted, trying to comfort him, but the walls were too high, and escape seemed impossible. The sun burned above them and hours passed slowly, yet the herd stayed close, hoping for a miracle. From the tall grass, golden eyes began to appear. A pride of lions had heard the rhino's cries and followed the sound. They moved closer, quiet and careful, their eyes fixed on the trapped animal. The older rhinos sensed danger and quickly formed a circle around the pit. They snorted and stomped, ready to defend their friend. But the lions were many, and the herd was small. The first lion stepped out, muscles tense, followed by others. When they roared together, the rhinos began to back away in fear. The trapped rhino watched helplessly as his herd disappeared into the distance. He was alone, and there were too many lions. They crept closer, eyes glowing in the fading light. A few jumped into the pit, growling and snarling. The young rhino tried to fight back, swinging his head and kicking with all his strength. But the space was too small, and he had nowhere to run. Dust rose around him as the lions clawed and bit. It felt like the end was near. Then, the ground began to shake. At first it was gentle, like soft thunder under the earth. The lions stopped, confused by the strange sound. The trembling grew stronger until the air was filled with deep rumbles. The rhino lifted his head, his eyes wide with surprise. A herd of elephants appeared, led by a massive bull with long tusks. His loud trumpet echoed across the plains, warning the lions to stay back. The lions froze, knowing they couldn't win. The elephants moved closer, forming a wall around the pit. With heavy steps and swinging trunks, they forced the lions to retreat. One by one, the lions vanished into the tall grass. The elephants then turned their attention to the pit. The young rhino stared up at them, his body shaking with fear. He had never been this close to elephants before, and didn't know what to expect. But as he looked into their eyes, he saw no anger, only calm and kindness. The leader, a giant bull with long tusks, stretched out his trunk, gently touching the edge of the pit. The other elephants stood close, watching carefully as if they understood the young rhino needed help. They began to study the pit, moving around it slowly and carefully. The elephant seemed to be thinking, trying to find a way to save him. Then, working together, they started picking up branches, dry grass, and soil with their trunks. One by one, they tossed the materials into the pit, hoping to create a slope the rhino could climb. The young one tried to move upward, but the soft dirt crumbled under his heavy body, sending him back down. Still, the elephants didn't stop. They worked harder, using their tusks to push at the pit's edges, breaking the ground bit by bit. Others continued tossing in more branches and soil. Their teamwork was quiet but strong, like they shared one heart and one goal: to save the little rhino. Even from a distance, the rhino herd watched in awe, unable to believe what they were seeing. As the sun disappeared and night covered the plains, the elephants stayed. They formed a circle around the pit, keeping the young rhino safe inside. In the dark, pairs of glowing eyes appeared. The lions had returned. But whenever the predators came too close, the elephants trumpeted loudly, shaking the air and sending them running back into the grass. The great herd took turns resting, but one elephant always stayed awake, guarding the frightened rhino. When morning came, they started again. The elephants worked together, widening the pit and breaking hard soil with their tusks. The rhino was weak, but seeing their efforts gave him strength. Still, progress was slow, and the lions were waiting nearby, hoping the elephants would give up. A helicopter appeared above them. It was the Kruger National Park Rangers. The humans landed quickly and saw what was happening. The rangers moved carefully, making sure it was strong enough to hold. A veterinarian climbed down into the pit, his boots sinking into the soft soil. The young rhino lay still, breathing heavily. His body was covered in scratches and deep wounds from the lion's claws. The vet gently cleaned the cuts, sprayed medicine, and gave him a mild sedative to ease the pain. For the first time, the frightened rhino began to relax. The next challenge was even harder, lifting him out. The elephants watched silently from nearby. Their giant shapes stood still against the setting sun, their trunks swinging gently. It was as if they understood the rescue. Their calm presence gave courage to everyone there. Each time the rhino slipped, the elephants let out low rumbles, almost like words of encouragement. Finally, after hours of effort, the young rhino reached the top. A cheer broke out among the rangers, and the elephants trumpeted loudly, their trunks waving proudly in the air. The rhino blinked in the sunlight, confused and tired, but alive. It was a moment of relief and joy for everyone who had fought to save him. The veterinarians worked quickly, checking his wounds and giving him fluids. The elephants stayed close, refusing to leave until they were sure he was safe. Their eyes followed every movement, filled with care and calm. The rangers couldn't believe what they were witnessing, animals showing such deep kindness toward another species. Over the next few days, the rangers stayed nearby, watching over the recovering rhino. They decided not to take him to a rescue center, believing he would heal best in his home. The elephants returned often, quietly visiting the area, as if making sure their young friend was all right. Slowly, the rhino grew stronger. His wounds healed, and his steps became firm again. One golden morning, he stood tall and began walking toward the plains where his herd was grazing. When they saw him, the rhinos rushed forward, rubbing their horns against him softly. From a distance, the elephants watched in silence. Then, with one final trumpet, they turned and walked away. That day, the African plains saw something truly special, a moment that proved even in the wild, compassion and courage can live side by side.